Today's episode of The Outer Roll on the Monkey Sports Podcast is brought to you by Goalie Monkey. You already know. Go to goaliemonkey.com, plug in promo code podcast10 when you are prompted for promo codes, 10% off your entire order. We got goalie skates, we got pads, we got chest protectors, sticks, anything and everything you could need for the inevitable start of the hockey season that's coming sooner than you think. Goaliemonkey.com, we got everything you need. Promo code podcast10, PODCAST, the number 1010 off your entire order. Get them while they're hot. Get them now. We'll see you over at goaliemonkey.com. Let's get into some Outer Roll.
Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome back to another episode of The Outer Roll on the Monkey Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. A little bit different episode today. Not a lot going on. I mean, obviously it's the middle of the summer, the dog days of summer, with an added global pandemic going on. Almost said nationwide. Kind of nationwide because the rest of the world sort of figured it honestly, out by now. But either way, not a lot really going on to bring you. Obviously the NHL is closing in on starting. The NHLPA and the NHL just came to an agreement to extend their CBA. So they're, for what it looks like, are trying to power forward with playing hockey this season and trying to wrap up this 2019-2020 season that's going to have lasted about a year by the time it's finally finished. But we'll get into that in a little bit. We got Grayson in studio. Grayson, what's going on, buddy?
Nothing much. There's not much going on, like you said, but we're here. We're still going strong, and I mean, I'm excited for another episode.
Yeah, absolutely. We we made the. I've said this before on other podcasts, and if you've been a follower of not just the individual shows, but the podcast as a whole, first of all, thank you. Obviously, we appreciate it. But, this podcast was something that's been in the works for, 3 years, 2.5 years, pretty much since
longer than
I
I've
started.
been here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was like second week that I was here. So we obviously have dedicated to wanting to bring you a podcast on as much of a schedule as possible. And things have shifted around with our content department. And, we're all wearing a lot of different hats right now through all this as we try to figure out, we're making changes with our website here coming soon, and that's, obviously going to take a lot of time up. So we're dedicated to trying to bring you guys as much content as possible, and that's why we wanted to hop on today, talk a little bit about the NHL, talk about goalies, anything like that. Obviously, the goalie community is super tight-knit. You guys have been awesome, great supporters of the podcast. Looking at all the stats, the goalie episodes always just crush every Monkey Sports Podcast. It always seems to be this one. So obviously wanted to bring you guys one and wanted to extend a thank you for there. But kind of getting into that goalie community, you're wearing a GGSU shirt right now. Yeah. Talk a little bit about kind of just how I feel like the goalie community is so different than even any other sports community. Like,
honestly, yeah.
And, from the people we've had on the podcast, has been people that you have known and have trained with or met or whatever it might be. So maybe go into a little bit of like how unique the goalie community is compared to anything else.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone is as lucky as I am to get to meet and experience the things that I have so far. Obviously, there's people who get to experience much more than I have, but I'm very happy with what I've gotten to experience so far in the goalie community. And it's so unique because they're addicted. That when someone's addicted to their sport, and I feel like goalies show that more than anything because they can personalize everything that they wear, and I feel like it's the specialty of being able to express who you are as a player, as a person, and as a goalie on your equipment, on your helmet, and even just out on the ice with the way you play. You can express yourself in so many different ways, so I feel like that maybe helps in the addiction of it and why the community grows so much and everyone supports each other, and people are always trying to figure out what's the best way I can play this way, what's the best way I can make the save. I think it's so special, and I'm kind of glad to be in it.
So what's cool too, and I think that's another thing that's really unique to specifically hockey goalies is like there's a support system that kind of has to be in place from the very first second that you say I'm going to be a goalie till your entire career, because not only are you're the last line of defense for your team and obviously everything that goes into it on the ice, but off the ice, like goalie is expensive. Like it's not cheap to play.
It's a commitment in every aspect if you want to be successful.
Absolutely. And if you're a child playing or you're moving up through the ranks, like you're not paying $5,000 to buy your stuff. Like it's coming from your parents. No. It's coming from whoever it's coming from. And that requires like a level of support as well. And even from like a coaching aspect. So like I coach lacrosse and I've never played lacrosse goalie, but more or less I understand, the steps, and I've played enough to understand like how to teach the position. But I feel like hockey goalie is so uniquely different in the way you move your body and stuff that like you then need a specific coach that's going to teach you how to do this. And that's just an added layer of support. So I assume that helps play into it too, is just everything you're around is like,
it's so specific.
People wanting you to be a good goalie. Right. Exactly.
Even on a team, on the teams that I was on, you get really close with the goalies that you're with. And when there's a bad relationship between you and another goalie, then it shows. Because if you're not supporting your goalie, whether you're the starter, the backup, the third string, maybe even just the fourth, maybe even the practice goalie, you never see a game. It doesn't really matter who you are. I think the relationship between you and any other goalie on your team is very strong. For me, going through all of high school, I remember my freshman year, the other goalie on my team, Brian Pikowski, he was a senior, I was a freshman, and that was the tandem. And it was big for me because it was this guy who's been here through all the years, and then me coming in, and I got the reins next year. Like there's no one ahead of me. Like all the other goalies are gone. But I mean, that relationship, we would warm up every single game together. We were talking to each other every single practice, no matter if it was in the locker room or on the ice. I remember one of the most ridiculous things we ever did was he was a full right goalie and I'm a regular goalie, and we switched gloves and blockers. So, I mean, we didn't just switch gloves and blockers as in I had a full right set and he had the full, No. I had 2 gloves and he had 2 sticks and 2 blockers. It was one of the most ridiculous practices we've ever had, but it's kind of just like, playing around like that. It's having fun out on the ice. But then going through high school and even into juniors, every single goalie partner I've kept in touch with, even on other teams, like people in the same league I still talk to. One of my best friends that I talk to right now was on my juniors team in Breckenridge. Like we talk, I think, every day. I can't think of the last time we didn't talk. So I think it's the special bonds that you like create and why it's so special, because you're warming up the same, you're helping each other warm up, you're talking to each other. I think you're messing this up, you need to work on this in like the nicest way possible, and you're pushing each other to be the best goalie.
So you mentioned he was a full right. We just finished up doing a in-store giveaway, so anyone listening that joined that, thank you for your participation.
Yep.
But one of the people that won a stick was a full right goalie, and he was asking about, I think it was a Warrior stick that's like not coming out until 2022 or something.
Yeah.
And we kind of told him, it's like, hey man, here's the situation. We can get you another full right stick. And he's like, no, I'll wait. And that kind of got me. It's like, I sat for a second. I was like, man, this guy is willing to wait 2 years to get this, new technology and a full right stick. Like, either full right goalies are very few and far between, or this person's super dialed in, and it's probably a little bit of both. But like left-handed lacrosse goalies are not that unique. Like they more and more are kind of becoming a thing. But how like rare is it to see a full right goalie? Because I feel like it's like a 1 in like 20 something thing. It's you hardly see him in the NHL. Like I forget. I looked up how many there were, but there's a few. They're not non-existent, but you don't really see them much. But when you do see them, you notice them. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the best goalies I did see, I forget what college he goes to right now, but I saw him playing in the NA against the Brahmas up here after one of my U18 games. And I just remember thinking this guy was incredibly good. He was a full right goalie, and I'm like, this guy's special because I don't know if it like really changes with shooters all that much, but it does get in some shooters' heads. Because they're going for that blocker shot, for that rebound, and it ends up just being a catch. Mm-hmm. So you have to change up the entire thinking process of how you're going to play, especially at the level like the NAHL, or even he's in Division I right now. Mm-hmm. But
It's like, it's not super rare, but it is, unless you look around, like, you won't really see it.
Yeah, that was going to be my next point too, of like, again, going back to lacrosse, like having played against pretty much all right-handed goalies growing up and then seeing a lefty, it's like, oh man, like I don't know how to shoot anymore. Like I'm completely accustomed to shooting off stick or whatever, off hip, and all of a sudden that's an easy save for somebody on the other side. So
one of the most common shots for a player to take for like a quote-unquote easy goal that a lot of goalies struggle with covering is a blocker low shot just over the pad, because it's hard to reach with the stick. It's a weird angle to really reach down and like make that save. So I feel like a player who thrives off of a goal like that versus a goalie who has their glove there instead of their blocker may be stumped, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Going off of that too, like, so hockey, I think more so, maybe baseball, but I think more so than a lot of sports, there's a pretty even blend of righties and lefties, and you kind of need it when you're kind of building a team out and everything. But that kind of begs the question too of like what the process is that pushes a player to become a goalie. Because like in lacrosse, pretty much everyone starts as a midfielder. If you really like running, you stay as a midfielder. If you don't like running so much, but you're good with your stick, you go to attack. If you're bad with your stick, you go to defense. And if you're bad at doing that, you go to goalie. That's just kind of like not a lot of
Just
kids.
breaks it down, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we've had, I mean, even people that were on this podcast have come on and like, no, I grew up, I love the big stick, and I became a goalie that way. But there's pretty much a progression for it. So is it similar in hockey, or is it like, no, you want to do it, or you just you drew the short stick, hop in goal for a day?
At a certain point, yeah. I feel like a lot of the, like, I mean, Rigsby was on, and she told a very similar story to how a lot of people have it. Was like, okay, I was like one of the younger ones in my family or something like that, something along the lines. I'm not sure if she said exactly that, but that's how it was for me. Was I had two older brothers. My oldest brother actually was a goalie as well, but I had a middle brother and then me. And so what I would do with one of my buddies and my brother was I would just play goalie for them out on the street. And then when it got hot, because we lived in Arizona, we'd go inside and we'd play knee hockey for another 3 hours, and I'd be playing goalie like 90% of the time. But then I always enjoyed player. I didn't really like goalie all that much before I was like 10 or something like that, between like 5 and 10. Like I wanted to play goalie, and I remember playing goalie like really, really young. But then there's kind of that like zone where it's most people just get pushed into it and then they ended up liking it. But I was at the point where I was good at it, even though I didn't love playing it, but I was like good at it. So I just kept going with it. So I thought that'd be the more viable option for me to continue on.
Sure. So one thing I've noticed that seems to be kind of a trend in goalkeeping, and like one thing that even from doing this podcast, pretty much everyone we've had on have said the same thing, but just being like gear nerds, being completely in love with all the gear that they use. And like a guy like you or somebody in that situation, it's like, I was kind of put into goalie. It took me a while to like love it. Like when did it obviously click? I mean, obviously it has clicked, but when did it click to where it's like, okay, this is sweet and I can do all this, I can customize all this stuff, I can do whatever I want? Like, was there any like moment or player or anything that you saw and you were like, man, like that's so cool, I want to get into goalie that way? Or was it just like the more you wore stuff, the more it was like, okay, yeah, this is pretty sweet?
I think my oldest brother had a big help for it, where he was getting his gear and he was playing, and I was around all that time, like watching him play, and I was like, oh, I want to be kind of like that. I like goalie looks so cool, like the way like he was playing and all that stuff. I'm like, that sounds awesome. But then also watching goalies in the NHL, I don't think there was a goalie specifically that I was like, man, I love that gear. I was never really, and I don't really think I'm still like addicted to goalies in the NHL like other people are. Like I do have my favorites, but I don't think I'm like looking at that as like an inspiration. I'm the kind of guy who looks at like, I don't know, like middle level goaltenders, junior level goaltenders, or people in like college or something, and then like get more inspiration off of that, because I get to see them working hard. And that's why I think I talked about it a little bit, how Rigsby was like a huge inspiration for me when I was like 16 years old at the camp, because I got to see her doing all of her workouts. I got to be on the ice with her. I got to see the work that she was putting in behind the scenes, and it was inspirational for me. But I think like the clicking moment was just kind of realizing it was something I wanted to do, and then you end up I feel like any big goalie who's like into gear has had this kind of night where you're up until 2 a.m. looking at different videos. You're looking at different sets. You're like, man, oh, that's sick. Like flipping through Instagram, flipping through Facebook, flipping through, Google this, that, and the other, looking up any and every video where you're just like, this is awesome. Like, I want to do this. And it's an addiction at that point. But I think it was kind of like in that area when I was like probably 13, when I was going to realize like, all right, I really want to take this serious.
Yeah. See, one of my, not necessarily biggest fears, but kind of what I joke with friends is like, I would be terrified that my son or daughter wants to be a hockey goalie. Because I 100% know that like there would be that dedication. It's like, oh, I want this new pad line every year. It's like, Dad doesn't have $5,000 to shell out every season for a new pad line.
Thinking back, that's like what I didn't understand as a kid. It's
right.
Like, I want all that new gear. And then my dad was like, you don't need it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want it though. Like I'm like, I need it.
Yeah. Even with lacrosse, like I remember being in high school and I think it was junior or senior year, we took like 2 or 3 big trips, and it was always like, my parents said, if you enjoy playing it, like we'll continue to support it.
Yeah.
And then seeing just like the final bill and stuff, I was like, man, we spent however many grand to play lacrosse for one season of like public school sports. Like that's insane. And then, now obviously working in this industry and stuff, having a much bigger appreciation for that is, I mean, it's apparent, and it's cool. And that's why, again, why I think the community is so closely bonded together is it's like, yeah, I mean, you're buying a used car with the money that you're spending. So from our perspective, obviously we're trying to get out on the ice and like test gear out and write descriptions and stuff that are down to the nitty gritty of exactly what every single thing does and what different straps do in different locations and all that stuff. Like we're trying to provide the most information that we can because obviously it's an investment. It's not like buying a $50 pair of lacrosse gloves. Not that that's a drop in the bucket, but at the same time, like,
that's the one thing I've always thought, like comparing goaltending to other sports here. Not much like hockey player as much, because like that's still like pretty expensive.
And you go through stuff quicker as a player, right? But
yeah, usually, because your sticks are gonna break faster. In a way, it depends. But like looking at baseball stuff, I remember like going down there and like looking at like all the prices and stuff. I was like, man, if I was a baseball player, I'd be buying like 6 bats.
Well, what's
and, like
crazy,
I would just trash 2 of them and like never touch them.
What's crazy about baseball too is it's like that stuff is built to last, and it's not that hockey stuff isn't, but you can use a baseball. I have my grandfather's baseball glove like at my parents' house, and it's fine. It does every job you need it to do. Yeah. Where it's like you're not going to get that out of anything else. Like a leather baseball glove, not ever really going to change. Mickey Mantle was making the same catches that Mike Trout's making in center field. Like it's not that different, you know. Whereas like hockey, you go to a bar or something and see like an old leg pad posted or an old mask, and you're like, man, somebody probably could have died in that. Like that's like wearing technology's come pillow.
The furthest way for goaltenders,
right? Which makes
a
the
long
most
journey.
sense. Yeah, which makes sense as to why things are so expensive and why and same with the baseball player. Like you buy a glove, you're going to use that for years. Or you're going to use the same line or model or whatever for years. And we've talked about it with, just all the people that we've had on this podcast so far about like trying to get somebody into a new pad line or switching them from Bauer to CCM or to Warrior, whatever it might be. And like how tough that is because people are just so one-track minded in a sense of just like, nope, my first set of pads ever was a CCM. I'm going to wear CCM for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so I think that's always unique to kind of hear from the marketing side of like, hey, we're trying to, get people into our product, but at the same time, we're trying to give them like the best experience that they can have too.
You see that a lot on social media too. Like, I feel like it's really dominant with Warrior because Warriors, like, they have amazing gear. Like, I'll stand by that through and through. And I'm not going to lie here. I talked to the rep Kirk who we had on. And I remember before like the G5s came out, I was like, I don't like your guys' gloves. Like, I didn't like the G4. I tried it. Like, Chris had them. I didn't like the GT2 all that much. I remember I used Chris's GT2s in a warm-up one time, took like 3 shots and gave it back to him. I was like, I hate this. Like, this is the worst. And, I mean, it's not the worst for everyone. It was just the worst for me. Like, I'm so used to a specific type of glove. Right. That I couldn't catch with that thing. It didn't feel right to me. But then he gave me the G5s to like test out for everything that we did, and I was like, this is a great glove. You guys did something right. And because they elongated the T, which was something I was very used to. And even though I didn't like the stiffness of the glove all that much, like give it a month and like it's what I would love. So it's like it's all feeling about like what you really like. So.
I feel like we're in the right right place to be talking highly of Warrior just based on the podcast stats from that episode compared to every other one. You guys liked hearing about the Warrior stuff and liked seeing the Warrior stuff. I loved doing that
project too. Like, that was an amazing time because I loved diving into like this whole new pad line with him, and especially like the new helmets and stuff like that. I think it was great for people to see like a really in-deep explanation of all these things from the people who developed it. I think that's very important for a goalie to, especially when making decisions. But yeah, it's like we were saying earlier, I got off topic there kind of, but explaining, you know, what people are, they're so set on one mind. Like one person's like, oh, I'm a Bauer guy, I'm nothing else, I'm going to be in Bauer.
Right.
You know, I feel like people need to be more open-minded to that overall. At least give it a shot. Like, go into something open-minded, and like not even just in goaltending like equipment, but in like everything about goaltending, like techniques, training methods, everything. Go into it with an open mind, with this could work, instead of like, oh, I don't really like it, like I don't think it's gonna work. Like, be open-minded, think positively about all of it, and you might have different results. If you go and try a Vaughn V9 pad and you don't like it, go try the SLR2. It's a different pad. You know, that might fit you. Everyone has something for everyone in the goaltending industry.
Yeah. What's funny is on our last hockey podcast, Off the Ice, when we had Jake Horton from CCM, he was saying like he became a CCM guy because he did like open himself up to it. And he's like, oh, I forget what he had worn before. He might not have mentioned, probably not. But anyway, he was like, you get accustomed to like the good and the bad, right? So he was wearing skates and he's like, oh yeah, they kind of hurt my feet, but like whatever, they've always hurt my feet. That's what I've always been used to. And then he said he put on CCM skates and it was like life-changing. He's like, wait, like, this doesn't have to hurt? Like, I just assumed this was how hockey was played, or like how it was going to be.
So many people in my generation grew up. They're like, your feet are going to hurt for a month.
Right.
Like, but now it doesn't have to be like that.
Right. And I think that anything really, but like goaltending especially, it's you use something for a half of practice. You're like, wait, man, I actually can make these kind of saves, or I can slide this way. Like, who knew?
Yeah, especially like switching from something like, I don't know what other like older brand that I was using, but I remember using the 1S pads for the first time. I didn't like certain things about them, but the sliding of those pads were incredible. So when you go back to a different brand at the time, you're like, like what's going on? Like, why can't I slide? You're like, this is so easy. So it's kind of funny when you find things like that. Yeah.
Right. I remember, again, from the lacrosse side of it, like the first lacrosse head that I like really wanted, like one of my buddies had it and I used his stick for like one game or something. I was like, oh my God, like this is awesome. It's like, Mom and Dad, like I want this head. Got the head, used it for I think maybe a full season or so, and then realized like it's whatever. I guess my progress wasn't meeting the equipment that I was using, because then I realized like, wait, this is a defensive head, and like I'm trying to play offense, like it just isn't working. And then you make one switch and it's like the next head that I moved into, still to this day have like 5 of them and love it. And it's not, and I've tried a bunch of other stuff and, you know, obviously like things for different reasons, but it's just funny when you have that like aha moment of like, oh, like your equipment does affect how you play. And I think that especially for goalie, that's so like hyper real, you know, that
my buddy Sam, who was down here, he had a similar thing happen to him where I forget I think he was in Coho for like the long.
Hey, shout out Coho.
Yeah, shout out Coho. I remember that's when I first met him. He was in like this custom Coho set. And like he didn't really like the glove because it was like really stiff for him. And then he moved to Vaughn's, I think, Vaughn V7s. And he had those custom and they were like insanely oversized for him and he just didn't know it. And I remember telling him, I was like, dude, like I'm standing next to you. Your knee's not that big.
Massive.
Yeah, I was like, your knees are not that much bigger than me. Like he's a big guy, like granted, but I'm like, dude, like this isn't gonna work. And I remember he came here about a year ago now, and I got him in, I think it was like a 33, and he's like, these are really comfortable. And I was like, yeah, I've been telling you. I'm like, your stuff's oversized. And so it was kind of funny to see him because he loved them. Right. But then I think he has a set of they were like, they're not really Optic 2s, they're not really genetic 4s, they're like a mix of the two that he ordered. It's a really awesome set that we've posted before. He got like a custom graphic, and I remember sitting next to Chris and doing his entire order. It was pages of like modifications where he was like, I wanted this outer roll on this pad, but I wanted this strapping from the Genetic Force, but I wanted the optic outer roll and like yada yada yada.
Right.
But
just this Frankenstein set.
yeah, because he knew exactly what he wanted
Yeah.
because he'd used a bunch of other stuff. But then he got into the smaller pad and he's like, these are the greatest. And I was like, yeah, like you thought those were great, like these are even more great.
So let this, if you're still listening to the podcast, let this be your wake-up call that if you're thinking about trying something new, if you don't know what you want, go out, test stuff out, go to your nearest Monkey Sports, try stuff on, talk to people. We will obviously help you out as much as possible. Shoot us a message on Instagram, ask us what you want. We're fielding questions like that kind of thing all the time. So
here's my biggest piece of advice before you get into everything is don't ask someone what the best thing on the market is. There is, at this point, with all the technology and all the different brands doing what they're doing, there is no quote-unquote best pad or best glove or best stick on the market. Everything has their specific specs and all the certain things that they like, and that goes back into finding exactly what you like. So when you're asking someone about what their favorite thing is, don't ask them what the best thing is, ask them what they like about what they like. And if you are a similar goalie to them, take that advice. Figure out what you like and compare it to other people and what they like, because there's no best pad out there right now. Every brand is good for something. So find out what you like and make your decisions not on a brand name, but on what you like.
yeah, I think that's what's cool and unique about being a retailer too is obviously every company is going to say, we have the best skate. We have the best stick.
Every time.
No one's going to get in and say, we've got the third best pad on the market and we're comfortable. Like obviously, that's marketing. We're
great runner-ups.
Yeah. But what's cool, being the retailer is, getting the opportunity to see everything and being able to say, you're going to reach your intended goal in anything that you wear, basically. But it's finding like what fits, what's comfortable, what improves your game, like all that stuff. And we're in a cool situation to be able to test that stuff out and tell people like, hey, if you're this goalie, use this. If you're this, whatever. And so I think that's what's kind of fun and rewarding about our job. But transitioning a little bit as we kind of wrap up here, we talked about at the top of the episode, NHL and the NHLPA agreed to extend their CBA. Again, season for right now sounds like it's going to happen. I'm kind of skeptical about pro sports happening, but where do you kind of sit on if you think we get hockey back in the next few weeks?
I hope so.
Same.
It's a big hope at this moment, but honestly, with everything going on, if it didn't happen, like I wouldn't be that upset.
Right.
Like if we can just get a full reset, chalk the season, let it lay to rest, just basically like it never happened. And actually, this is a question that I brought up the other day. If the NHL doesn't come back, what happens to the draft lottery? Do you redo it or do you keep that and then you decide who gets the first pick? Because it was going to be based off the playoffs for the NHL.
Oh, the end of the draft. Yeah, that's true.
So
the non-lottery.
It was like the number one pick. It was based off of like the first round for the NHL.
Oh, that's right. I forgot they changed it up like that.
So if they don't play that, what do you think happens?
I think the smartest thing is you just go back to like the NFL style of just snake. Just look at the regular season standings whenever the season ended. I know there was like a week left or whatever, but I think you just go back and say, okay, 1 through 31. Like if you finish dead last, if you're the Detroit Red Wings, you get the first pick. And then moving on to...
Well, I think they should just redo the lottery period and like without that first. I mean, it's iffy.
Yeah.
But I mean, like the Ottawa Senators have like an over 50% chance, and then the Red Wings have like basically the remainder of that.
Right.
But the Senators only have that much because they have 2 of the top 3.
True.
Or it was supposed to be the 2 of the top 3.
Right, yeah.
And so I think honestly, if the NHL doesn't come back, they should just redo that. That's saying, if it does come back, this is going to be one of the most ridiculous draft lotteries. And Lafreniere, I believe that's how you say it.
Lafreniere, yeah.
Something like that. If he gets on
Our French is not great. We apologize.
If he gets on a really good team off the bat, that team's going to be dangerous, and they're going to roll.
Yeah.
It's a weird moment.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, as a sports fan, obviously I want everything to come back, and I want to see professional sports being played. But at the same time, like, when does it become irresponsible? Like, not necessarily. Well, I mean, obviously for the health and safety of like the players and the staff and families and all that stuff is paramount. But like, what message do you send out to, when everything else is shut down and saying like, hey, we're fine? And lacrosse is kind of going through that right now where everything is supposed to come back like in a week and a half. And the only message is like, yep, we're playing. This is great. We're playing. This is awesome. But it starts to sort of feel out of touch when states are reclosing and there's other things happening that are like showing that it's getting worse before it's getting better. And it's like, I don't want to have this bad taste in my mouth for wanting to like watch sports.
You also got to think of the effect that a professional sport is going to have, like especially like the NBA and the NHL playoffs, specifically playoffs. How many people get together for those games?
Right, exactly. Who's going to go watch that?
Yeah, like even if like bars and restaurants and stuff like that aren't open, you still got to think of how many people are going to go to other people's houses and get involved and start, hanging out, watching games together, because like it could have a big effect in a way.
Yep.
So you got to really take that into account. Is this going to be dangerous? And with the way that the NHL is coming back and like you said, lacrosse, I don't know if it would be the best idea for it to happen. Yeah, I would like for it to happen, but
and
safety first.
Baseball is, going through their first round of testing and has already picked up, I think it was 66, 68,
It was something
like
with
that.
the NHL too, but they're not like releasing any team names or anything like that.
Which I think is frustrating. Like I don't know, I guess it makes sense, but I don't know. The
in a way, as like a viewer, you're like, I kind of want to know like at least what organization.
And
But
the oversight, or like
it's also for the player's safety though, for not telling anyone like, hey, like
no,
these
for
guys
sure. For sure, but just looking past it again kind of seems inappropriate as far as like a couple people are sick, but that's fine. They won't compete. We'll move on to everybody else. I don't know. Again, at what point do you have to become responsible and just say like, hey, we're gonna bite this bullet? And I think it has to be like a joint effort too, right? Like it's not going to be the NBA coming out and saying we're not going to play. It's going to be the NBA and the MLB coming out and saying we're both agreeing to not play, and the NHL and everybody else. Like
it can't just be one organization being like, hey, we're not playing anymore.
Yeah,
We'll
any
see you guys
billionaire
next
owner.
year.
Yeah, any billionaire owner is not going to want to eat that without knowing all of his people around him are doing the same thing. So I don't know. That's pessimistic, I guess, and not the way I wanted to really end the podcast. But either way,
I mean,
hopeful that something can happen and hopeful it gets done safely. But at the same time, would love to be responsible more than I would love to watch a baseball game.
The one thing I'm looking forward to is after we get to look back on all this. Wow, that feeling. I'm just thinking about it because we went rock climbing the other day and I remember like how amazing it was having like a ton of people there. I want that feeling back. I want that going to rinks with tons of people there and hanging out and watching games at restaurants, going to the games themselves in the arenas. Like,
Just about to say that.
Think about going back to there. I can't wait.
That first live experience back, that first concert, that first game is going to be a blast.
Man.
Yeah, pretty pumped for that, for sure.
That feeling, it's somewhere down there. And I can't wait till it just pops out.
It's like childlike wonder. Like, remember going to your first program. It's like, oh, man.
It's like
this was taken
8-year-old
away,
Christmas.
now it's back.
I'm waiting for it.
I'm pretty excited. And then telling your grandkids, like, oh, yeah, I remember 2020. Like, yeah, that was wild.
Oh, yeah, that's another thought I've had is like someone asking you 15 years down the line, 20 years down the line, like, do you remember this? You're like, absolutely.
I always wanted to live through, a huge moment in history and like have a vivid memory of it.
Maybe not this hard.
Yeah, I didn't exactly think this would be it necessarily, but
Maybe
either way, it's unique enough. Anyway, that's going to do it. We were just kind of riffing this week. Like we said, not a ton going on, but wanted to obviously bring you guys as much content as possible and thank the goalie community for being as supportive as you guys have been. Y'all are awesome. As you already know, promo code podcast10, PODCAST, the number 1010, 10% off your entire order at goaliemonkey.com. We'll be back again in a month's time. We're going to continue to try to bring you as much content as possible. In a month from now, we'll definitely have a lot more going on with the NHL coming back, or if they don't, we'll certainly have something to talk about either way. But make sure you stay subscribed to the Monkey Sports Podcast. As always, we appreciate the support, and we will see you next time.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Wear a mask.